more minute here, guys.
This is this between us.
The number one podcast in the world.
This is
the JBU.Show featuring Austin,
from the Miller Talk Podcast,
ALLAN,
the American Sincerist,
and now your host,
Cam Allen.
All right, how's it going, everybody? My name is Chris, and this is the JBU.Show. And we got a lot to talk about today and nothing at all to talk about. There's a lot of things going on today that's kind of interesting, but the first thing that I noticed when I sat down today to do the show, in fact, I wasn't even necessarily planning on doing a show today, but I realized right away this media blackout, it seems. And I know if you're on X chronically, it might not seem like there's a media blackout because X is where we go to get things that aren't being covered in the mainstream news. But if you're in the United States right now, you have no idea that a country-changing event is taking place on the other side of the world right now. An event that hopefully will have ripple effects here in the United States. An event that has really proven certain things and certain people to be right. An event so potentially powerful that it has the establishment in Europe terrified to the point they are doing unprecedented things. What are some of those things? Well, let's find out ourselves. Let's see what Keir Starmer had to say just a couple days ago to bring us into this.
Tomorrow's march in London is a reminder of what we're up against in the battle of our values. The organisers, including convicted thugs and racists, are peddling hatred and division, plain and simple. Their goal is to convince people that Britain's problems are caused by those living alongside them. But that is not the Britain that I know. This is a country built on decency, fairness and respect. A country that is at its best when people from different backgrounds come together in common purpose. This is our country, with a majority who share those values, a majority who may not always be as loud, but must always define who we are. So, my government will not stand in the way of peaceful protest, but we will act decisively against hatred. We will use the full force of the law when that hatred manifests as violence. And we will ban those coming into the UK who seek to stir it up, as we have done already. Because this country belongs to all of us. And I will not tolerate anyone who seeks to stand in the way of that.
How touching. I want to point out a couple things that he said in this.
Built on decency, fairness and respect.
Okay. Decency. What does that mean? Fairness. Respect. Okay, here in the United States, we talk about fairness. We talk about fairness under the law. There is no such thing as fairness You can have fairness under the law. You can have equality under the law. But you can't have, just generally speaking, fairness. Life is inherently unfair. Some of us are born at disadvantages to others. Now, somehow, the left has managed to convince people that fairness is trying to compensate for those differences. But more on that a little bit later. Let me let him continue here because he didn't quite get to the point that I was looking for.
A country that is at its best when people from different backgrounds come together in common purpose. This is our country, with a majority who share those values, a majority who may not always be as loud, but must always define who we are. So, my government will not stand in the way of peaceful protest.
My government will not stand in the way of peaceful protest. Remember that he said that. Will not stand in the way of peaceful protest. Okay? Keep that in mind.
But we will act decisively against hatred. We will use the full force.
Hatred. What is hatred? How do you define hatred? And I ask because the way we all define hatred is different. The way I define hatred is surely very different than the way you define hatred.
Force of the law.
It's a clever word.
When that hatred manifests as violence. And we will ban those coming into the UK who seek to stir it up, as we have done already.
We will seek to ban those who intend to come to the UK to stir it up. Now, of course, what he's actually talking about is just people that oppose him. Just people that oppose the Labour government, the incredibly radical nonsense that the UK has stood for decades now. As we already have. He's telling you, we will not stand in the way of peaceful protest. But we've already banned people from coming to, quote, stir up the UK. How? Via free speech and peaceful protest. Now, of course, free speech is a beautiful idea in Britain, but it's not a protected, inalienable right like it is in the United States, that's what allows him to do this. That's why the UK silences 30 people a day by putting them in jail for what they term as hate speech. Now look, you might be asking yourself, why me specifically, a very pro-American, a very nationalist and America-centric person is even concerned about Britain? Generally speaking, I'm not. This is Europe's problem, right? The fact that Britain doesn't recognize any inalienable rights for its people, that's for the British to deal with. The fact that British are inherently, in recent years, cowards that kneel for a king and that just allow their country to be sold off piece by piece by people who inherently hate it. That's their problem. That's not ours. However, there is no denying, there is no separating the fact that they are inextricably linked to us. They are our brothers, whether we like it or not. It is where we come from. Now, we fought a war to get away from them for a reason, but it is where we come from. And So I think that it is incredibly important to support our brothers anytime that there is a glimmer of hope. And that's what today is, a glimmer of hope. Many of you have maybe heard the name Tommy Robinson. You might be familiar with him, you might not be. He is fairly well known in conservative circles here in the United States. This is a man who, like few here in the United States, represents the same values that we hold dear here in the United States. He's a man that represents the values we wish our European brethren held. And he's a man that has put everything on the line for what he believes in. And for that reason alone, he should be admired and supported. So this was posted about 3 days ago. Let's take a look at some words from Tommy Robinson and also American podcast host Glenn Beck leading up to this event. Glenn Beck was a speaker at the event, and some interesting things have taken place. First, though, let me
Because this
finish this
country
a second time.
belongs to all of us. And I will not tolerate
It belongs to all of them, except for Tommy Robinson and the right wing.
anyone who seeks to stand in the way of that.
Seeks to stand in the way of what? Seeks to stand in the way of what exactly? Because if we take Tommy Robinson at his word, and I do, because he is sacrificed for the words he has spoken quite a lot. What he is protesting is people that stand in the way of British history's traditions and values. So you would think Keir Starmer would actually be in support of Tommy Robinson, but he isn't. Why? Well, again, let's take a look here and step back just a little bit. All right. Sorry, there's like 6 billion different things I got on here, so it's going to take me a second to get to everything. We're going to start with this video right here. This is Tommy Robinson on Glenn Beck's podcast, which he was doing from the UK in preparation for this event.
We have got over 200 citizen journalists beaming tomorrow live. TikTokers, Nick Shirley's here speaking from the United States. Yeah. We've got many different journalists coming from all corners of the globe to cover this. And they will show the world what's happening on Britain streets tomorrow. I'm glad you're here, Glenn. I'm very grateful that you've took this journey. I've heard it might be your last one to Britain ever.
Well, that's what I was told today. I mean, that's insane. I was told if I speak tomorrow, it will be my last. This will be the last time I'm allowed into England.
Yeah, don't worry, because Keir Starmer will be gone soon. We're about to have a political revolution. We'll have a new government.
But that's insane.
For what? What are you going to talk about? Free speech?
Right. All of the things this country was built on. All of the things that you were supposedly defending in World War II.
It's just, for me, it's great that the world can see what we're living under. The world can see the way he's treating you, the way he's treating politicians. How do you think he treats us? How do you think they treat us?
Oh, I can tell you now, just being here and really looking and trying to figure out how is this happening. They have decimated all of the, we would call them red states in America, all the small towns all over England, all the farming communities, all the factory communities, all the hardworking communities. They've just decimated them. You guys, you have no manufacturing base anymore.
No, my hometown, Luton, was the home of Vauxhalls. Right. It employed 30,000 people. It's gone. My dad worked there. It's gone. There's nothing left.
So they've decimated it, and then they started importing people into those areas, away from them.
Into those areas who are hostile, aggressive, and hostile to us, hostile to our culture, hostile to our women, hostile to our daughters. They're hostile. And the facts speak for themselves. It's not, you can't just call it racism or extremism. In 2003, we had 8,000 rapes. Now we had 88,000 rapes. Are we supposed to just carry on while you open our borders and our women are raped continuously from one end of this country to the other? And we've had enough. We've had enough and we're paying for all this. And we're putting them in hotels.
I know.
So it can be stopped. It could be stopped like that. There's no will to stop it. There's no want to stop it, because the people they're bringing in, and I'll bring it back to the United States of America. Picture Minnesota, where do you think Somalians come from the hottest place on the planet
To go to the coldest place.
do you think they chose there?
No, the State Department did.
The State Department put them there, purple state. They know their birth rate will exceed the local Americans. They know they'll be loyal to the Democrat Party. They're importing votes. Well, picture that in Minnesota, but across the whole of the UK.
A lot more devious than that, most likely. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Now, the reason it's happening differently, slightly, in the UK than it is the United States is because we have two different systems of government. It is about undermining the system of government. 8,000 to 88,000 rapes in the UK. You would think that alone would be enough to put a halt to all immigration until the problem is dealt with, until the rapists are dealt with. But it's not. And see, the problem with radical Islam, not Muslims, but radical Islam, Islam in general. I keep saying radical Islam, but it is Islam in general, is that it is fundamentally incompatible. It requires living against Western Christian values. And look, whether you like the fact they're Christian values or not, they are. We used to just call them basic morals and values. But more on that later. It's not... You cannot import people into your country and allow them to not assimilate, allow them to come in not agreeing to live by your principles and values, and not expect your country to become their country, and not expect your country to be the same as the country they left from. If they wanted to come here to be American, or they wanted to go to the UK to be British, they would forgo those histories, traditions, cultural values, etc. Because they want to be British. Because the British have created a successful nation. The Americans, we have created a successful nation. Well, in order to maintain that success in that successful nation, it's not about hating. We have to maintain our values and our principles. Now, I want to be really clear. I am not one of these people that gives a shit about somebody's race. I'm not one of these people that thinks that people from another country, regardless of where it is, or of another culture or of another skin color, can't integrate into our society. Here in the United States especially, that is what is so unique about our society and so effective about it, is that they can. Now, that doesn't mean we can just endlessly import any number of people. But the fact is, the Bible says that we are all made in the image and likeness of God. The Bible says that we are all equal in the eyes of God. Who am I to say otherwise? Who am I to say that another person is lesser because of where they were born, or what color of skin they have, or what culture they were brought up in? But I am able to say that in the cultures that exist in the world, in the sets of values and principles and systems of law and ideas that exist in this world, ours is superior. And if we want people from around the world, if we want to allow people from around the world to come into our country, to be a part of our country, and to help strengthen our country, they must adopt those values and principles and cultural norms. Because despite the attempts by people that hate this country to rewrite our history, this is the greatest country in the history of the world. Now, I personally don't feel the same and can't say the same about the UK. But I do believe that the UK could be every great as the United States. So could any other European country, and so could any other non-European country. You do that by adopting the values and the principles laid out by our founding fathers. And it's not as if we can't improve upon those. We absolutely can. But nobody has thus far. And the farther we tend to stray from them, the worse things seem to get. Now, another thing that was said in that interview with Tommy Robinson, forgive me, Torch, whoever you are, for leaving your logo on screen. They don't endorse this or anything. That was just the end of that video. Anyway. What was I saying? The other thing that was said in that video was that Glenn Beck was told that if he were to speak at the event today that is happening now in Britain, I'm not sure how late it is there. I'm sure it's pretty late, so it's probably pretty much ended at this point. But it is, in fact, 5 o'clock on the West Coast. Britain would technically be the East Coast, so I'm sure it's fairly late there now. Regardless, it's hard to even fathom that level of tyranny, of fascism, actual fascism, not, whatever leftists are calling fascist today, in a Western country. Now, I can picture it in China, I can picture it in Russia, because they do that shit all the time. And a country does have a right to turn somebody away if they wish to. But to do so for nothing short of speech, and particularly speech that calls on the history supporting that country's ideals, that country's history, that country's principles, that's extremely troubling. And for a leader, Keir Starmer in this case, to just make the decision offhand, that is totalitarianism. Now, when we deny somebody into this country in the United States, Donald Trump doesn't make that decision. We have laws that determine whether or not you can or cannot enter the United States. And we have a right to refuse you if you have broken those laws or rules. I don't know exactly, as far as how that works between rules and laws, because they're not technically citizens, but regardless, the rules that allow somebody to come in, they're not determined by one man. They're determined by the people of the United States. And that is a big difference. And they do not single out anybody for political belief, even radical beliefs, because we fundamentally believe in freedom of speech, even if people visiting this country don't share the right to freedom of speech like we do. People in Britain have no freedom of speech, just like the people of Canada don't, or anywhere else in the world, literally, anywhere else in the world. There is no such thing as fundamental rights as they exist in the United States. And this is the thing that Europeans, that Canadians, that everybody else gets most incorrect about the United States, including Americans, and it's our most fundamentally important detail. That was not really the word I was going for, but whatever. And that is the difference between a right granted by government and a right recognized as inalienable by government. When the Founding Fathers wrote out the Bill of Rights, which they didn't even feel was necessary, and they didn't want to do it because they didn't want to limit fundamental rights to what solely was written on paper. Which is why the last two amendments to the Bill of Rights essentially say, plus anything else the people decide. Paraphrasing, obviously. In this country, we recognize that these rights are inherent to being alive. They are granted by God at our birth. And if you don't believe in God, fine, by the universe, whatever. Doesn't matter. The point is you inherently have them from the moment you are born. And therefore, no government can take them away. And the government that we instituted as people of this country is bound by the Constitution to honor and to respect those rights. That's why it doesn't matter how many crimes are committed with firearms. You cannot take them away. You cannot limit them. Because your right to self-defense, with whatever means exist, is inalienable. Now, because we have a system of government, we live in a world, we live in a practical world where there has to be, some system of change and effect. The one way that you can get around that is to amend the Constitution. But even then, as we've seen in many other countries in the world, you can outlaw guns all you want. People will still inherently defend themselves with whatever means available to them. Criminals will still use the guns. Regardless, the only way to limit a fundamental right is to change the Constitution. Now, the reason this rally is so important is not because of who's leading it or who's attending. It's because of two things. It's because of the backlash to it by the establishment in the UK. And it's because it is, in a sense, Britain's last hope. Maybe Europe's last hope. What parts of it can still be salvaged. As bad as certain areas of this country and a certain percentage of the population of this country has gotten in abandoning the principles that have built the West, Europe is 10 times farther on dismantling those values and those principles. It seems that Tommy Robinson stands alone in combating that right now. But if Britain doesn't take a sharp turn away from the path that it's been headed down, then this inevitably concludes in war. And I'm not saying war between the United States and Britain. but it concludes in war somehow between some group of people. Because at some point, you can only replace so many people with foreigners before the people that live there come to the obvious realization that they are being replaced. With foreigners, to be clear, with foreigners that don't share the same values, don't share the same principles, and openly admit that they are trying to take over your country. And of course, that's happening all across Europe. The good news is, while Tommy Robinson seems like a lone voice in the media, at least, today's rally proves he's not alone. Keir Starmer needed today's rally desperately to be Britain's January 6th. And I'm glad that the people of Britain, that the men of Britain were able to prevent granting him that luxury. It doesn't surprise me that the events today were peaceful. It surprises me that the leftists were unable to cause trouble and to frame them, more or less. Let's take a look at a few more things here. This is an interview that Glenn Beck did on GB News there in Great Britain just before today.
This Saturday, thousands of Brits will descend on Westminster protesting for a return of our free speech. Now, many people were meant to come from across the world to speak at the event, but Keir Starmer has decided to block them. One person concerned about the situation in our country, who has slipped through the net and is here in Westminster with me today, is American broadcaster Glenn Beck. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, of all the countries that you thought you would have to warn about a dark slide into authoritarianism, did you ever think it would be Britain?
No. I think that's why America cares. I mean, we've been watching you slide, and we're sliding in the same direction, okay? Before Donald Trump, we were in deep, deep trouble. And say what you want about Donald Trump one way or another, he is at least addressing the real issues, and he surely exercises his freedom of speech in every possible way. But we've been watching, because if we lose Europe and we lose England, not good things happen. We're about to lose Canada. I think Canada is sliding into God only knows what with their freedom of speech and all of their freedoms. I mean, the World Economic Forum Great Reset plan is active and underway in most of the Western world, and we're kind of standing alone right now, and don't know how this all ends. It's a real fight, and if people don't stand up, just to say, I don't stand up for hate. I don't stand up for, abolishing, anybody's religion or anything. I just want the law, and I want it to apply equally. And the most important is free speech. If you don't have freedom of speech, you don't have any of the others. You don't have any other. Our First Amendment is freedom of speech, religion, petition, to say to the government, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing? That's wrong. All of these things are in our First Amendment, backed by the Second Amendment. And don't forget, we have arms, okay? So you violate the first one, we have the second one to protect the first one. But the first one is speech and questioning your government. You must be able to do that.
One narrative that's taking place, especially on the American right, is this idea that Britain has fallen. My opinion is that we're down, but we're not out.
Oh, I don't think you're out. I wouldn't be here if you were out.
So you're hopeful?
I am. I'm cautiously optimistic, because I don't know how to judge. Even in America, the right is varied. Okay, there are those who are on the right that want a big
powerful government. I'm on the constitutional right, which I want a very small government. I want people to rule themselves and behave themselves, and I don't know how to judge England or Europe, so I don't know. I can't say I know everybody on the stage. I know everybody who's attending. I'm coming here for the people that I think have, just like in America, have not been listened to. Their towns have been destroyed, their jobs have been destroyed, their livelihoods, their families are at stake. There's real issues that are happening to these people, and for some reason, the elites, in not only your country, but our country, all over the West, they're ignoring those people. And nothing good will happen by ignoring those people and ignoring the law and selectively applying it. So I'm only attending to say, we hear you in America, and we're rooting for you. If you are for peace and you're for equal rights applied all across the board, and you're just standing for the Western culture and what Western culture has meant to the rest of the world, we're with you and we're rooting for you.
But the people on the left, they say, we're a country that's not that used to massive protests all the time. Go across the channel to France and they're used to that.
Yeah.
But in the last 10 years, it's just protest after protest. Now, do you think that this is just another example of how we're descending into anger? Or do you think actually maybe this is people waking up and saying, we need to change course?
Depends on what happens. We have a long line of when we started with protest.
I'm going to let him finish that, obviously, but I do want to point this out because this is a disagreement that I've had with ALLAN before, which is there a lot of use to protests or even rallies? And I'll admit he convinced me a little bit that there is a use to rallies and to bringing people together. For me, I see it a little bit different. The left protests all the time, as he mentioned there in France. France is the left, right? France is literally what the United States would be if we were a radical liberal or radical leftist country instead of a conservative republic. They went the opposite direction we did at about the same time. They went with radical, anarchy in overthrowing their kings and queens, and then created a democracy. We eventually had to, go to a radical revolution, but it was forced on us because we chose instead merely to stand on our principles and not be budged. And that is the difference. We didn't go and hang our leaders in the streets out of anger, righteous or otherwise. We said, we believe these things. As people subject to the crown of Britain, we are entitled to these things granted to us by God. Recognize these things and we have no problems. The King of Britain repeatedly refused. He sent his men over here to torture, to rape. Sound familiar? To quell dissenters. And eventually, we were left with no choice but to fight back and defend ourselves. We tried all the way up to the moment of the Boston Massacre. After American blood was spilled on the streets for merely believing in fundamental inalienable rights, we still agreed to send a letter to the king asking that he respect our rights and allow our continued rule under the crown. The king didn't even read it. He just sent more men. More redcoats. The difference is crucial in that. And while I wish I had a very nice point to tie that all together, I'm not sure that I do. Just recognize that difference. Let me hear what he has to say on this.
So we have a long history of it, and I was thinking I wanted to actually talk to Tommy. In America, as I've led some of these things before, we would have started at a church because it would have changed the tone of everything. And so that's one of the things I don't know. We have Martin Luther King. Do you have a Martin Luther King that was based in love and peace and never strike back? Never, ever strike back? I know Tommy is saying that right now. I've seen him on YouTube saying that a lot in the last few weeks. Don't give them what they want. It's beyond that. It's a great message, but it's beyond that. That's Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Jesus. They knew you cannot strike back ever because you become what you despise. And there are still enough people in the West that will see somebody like Martin Luther King hosed down in the streets or abused by their government because the government is out of control. But once you give them, if you give them a clear image of these guys are peaceful, they're just trying to be heard, and look at what the big state is doing, people will choose the small guy every time. Every time. That's why it's so critical that it's peaceful and calm and nobody is preaching anything. Otherwise you have mobs, and mob rule doesn't work.
Conservative voices who were planning to come at the weekend have been banned. Keir Starmer has characterised them as far-right agitators. Has he let the mask slip by basically showing that the British state is hostile to conservative ideas in basically any form?
I think it is interesting that I don't know what it says that I slipped through that net. Either
maybe you're too establishment.
Maybe, I don't know. I just know.
I think, frankly, he just overlooked it based on the people that were banned. People that were banned were government officials from other European countries. And now, I don't know the entire list of everybody that was banned, but they prevented government officials from other countries. They prevented other speakers, similar conservative commentators. These are not people that are violent, that endorse violence in any way. They believe in conservative values and principles, and that's it. The fact that Glenn Beck made it through, he said that a lot, that he didn't understand how he made it through. I think it's because he came earlier than expected. Most were coming on the day of or the day before the event. From my understanding, he'd been there for like a week before. So I think that was part of it. And then I also think that he just slipped under the radar somehow. But it was also relayed to him, as we heard in the last clip, that if he were to speak, he would never be allowed in Britain again.
Oh, that, when he was over, he talks a really good game. And when he was over with Donald Trump, he was in the Oval Office saying, no, we are for freedom. Are you? Are you? I think that is a really bad sign. You let people speak. Let people be heard.
One thing, if I could grab your opinion on it, that's going through the US Congress at the moment is something called the Mamdani Act. And it's this idea that you might be able to stop people from becoming citizens or even denaturalize them if they show support for totalitarian ideologies like socialism or Islamism. Is that something that...
So Islamism is different, and that's not being a Muslim.
Show support. And it's this... one thing, if I could grab your opinion on it, that's going through the US Congress at the moment is something called the Mamdani Act. And it's this idea that you might be able to stop people from becoming citizens or even denaturalize them if they show support for totalitarian ideologies like socialism or Islamism. Is that something that...
So Islamism is different, and that's not being a Muslim. That is being for Sharia law. Absolutely incompatible with any law in the West. It cannot coexist, okay? It just cannot. It won't coexist. And you have people that are coming in and are claiming one thing, but have significant ties to very anti-American kind of things. I think it's I think it's good to debate it. I think it's good to talk about it. I'm not sure exactly where I fall on it because I haven't seen the actual language for it. I think there are some people that have truly betrayed everything that citizenship means, and we have been so unbelievably lax. I mean, it's like passing out gum to become an American citizen. It's just, here's a big bag of citizenship, go grab it. It should not be that way. You know, citizenship is not a suicide pact. It is, we should be able to choose and say, you are going to help us be better.
This is a very important question, and it's one we've been facing right now, and I think that the solution to it is fairly straightforward and entirely consistent with the laws that already exist and our American beliefs. Because we don't believe in banning somebody because of the religion they subscribe to. But the fact is, becoming an American citizen is a privilege, not a right, for somebody born elsewhere. And here's the thing. He's right. Being a Muslim is not incompatible with the West. But Islamism is. Sharia law is. And so the simple fact is, in order to come to the United States, you have to forego all prior allegiances. You have to agree to the supreme law of the land, to uphold and defend it. That is the U.S. Constitution. And all laws, but obviously the focus is on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Because Sharia law is inherently incompatible, you must denounce it in order to become a U.S. citizen. You don't have to stop being a Muslim. You don't have to stop practicing your Muslim faith. But you do have to denounce the parts that are inconsistent with the values and principles that we hold as a nation. As long as you do that, as long as you agree to uphold and defend the supreme law of the land, the United States Constitution, then it should not bar you from entry into the United States. Now, I've already said this many times. I believe in pausing all immigration temporarily while we straighten out the issues that we have after years of importing people without a request for any allegiance. But other than that, I have no problem continuing with legal immigration sometime in the near future once we've straightened those problems out. And as long as somebody agrees to those same principles we have always demanded for somebody to become a citizen of the United States, or frankly, even to visit, you don't have to defend and uphold, but you do have to honor and respect, then I have no problem. And if somebody agrees to that and they move here and say, you know, during whatever period of time, we find out that they are not upholding the Constitution, because the other thing that's a concern, right, is you have these enclaves, like the one in Texas, where it's nothing but Muslims that live in this particular area. The fact is, that's a right they have in the United States. We have the freedom of association. If you want to build a town that only Muslims live in, you can't make it, you can't limit it to only Muslims. But if only Muslims choose to live there, that's fine. What you can't do is use the law. You can't use intimidation or anything else to prevent people from living there, to enforce laws that are inconsistent with the laws of the United States and of the Constitution. And if you do that, then you have gone against your promise to the United States in immigrating here, and we should and can deport you. Solving this problem is not difficult, and it's something that our founders already took care of for us. We just have to understand and do more than anything.
You have qualities and principles that are going to make us stronger.
Thanks.
If you're coming in and you hate America, you want to destroy America, you shouldn't have gotten your citizenship. Now, I'm not saying that about Mamdani. I just think he's wrong. But That's why
I will. I think
read
he
the
hates
language
this
carefully.
nation.
And just finally, you say you're cautiously optimistic about the future of my country and your country. What are the kind of clues that you'd be looking for to say, okay, yeah, I think we're on the right track here, we're back?
Stop putting people in jail for speaking their mind. Start applying the law evenly. I mean, you know, if I'm raping a child, I'm pretty sure I go to jail. That should be universal. You know, I hate to speak for your country and try to tell you what to do, because I so respect. And America, you know, I'm here because my father died. When my father died, I'm not the same man I was when my dad was alive, and I try to be better. But my father is important. You are family to us. You die, we're not the same. We're just not the same ever again. We need you to be strong. We want you to be strong. And I think the key is just remembering who you are. People have done so much work to get us to forget or be ashamed of who we are. All nations have made mistakes. All nations have been bad at times, okay? Are you getting better or not? Are you striving to be, as our Constitution says, a more perfect nation? You're never going to be perfect. Are you still striving to be a more perfect nation? When you start to say, you know what? We're Great Britain. We're England. And we don't have to rule the world, but we're England. And we're not ashamed of being England. And yes, we have laws. And yes, we expect certain things because that's our culture. I don't denigrate your culture, but this is ours, and we're proud of it. That's when I know you'll be on the right track, and we need you to be.
Hope Starmer's listening. Thank you so much for your time today. It was great to have you in.
Thank you.
It's amazing how effective.
People ask me, are you satisfied? Have there been...
It's amazing how effective that those that seek to destroy this nation and the West in general have been at getting us to feel embarrassed and ashamed of our histories so much that we're unwilling to defend them. Because as he just said there, at least here in the United States, our history is better than anybody else's on the planet. Hands down. Now, there's a difference between nations that are too weak and poor and small, just in general size, to do anything to anyone else, and so they've never done anything to anyone else. There's a difference between that and nations that are bigger, more powerful, and richer, that are capable of it, and that are frequently under attack from other nations like that. And so we have to compare apples to apples, I guess is what I'm saying. But as long as we do that, there is no nation on this planet that can hold their head as high as the United States of America. But we'll come back to that. In Britain, just like here in the United States, they want you to feel like you're alone. They want you to feel like nobody stands with you. But let's see if that's true. Let's see how the rally today turned out for the British.
This Saturday.
Let's start with the speech from Glenn Beck today at the rally.
I bring you
This is the actual speech that he gave.
greetings from the United States of America. It is such an honor to be with you today. It is really an amazing thing to see you all stand up, and I come here to stand with you shoulder to shoulder because of people like Tommy and people like you that have shown the courage to speak and stand when so few will. Thank you. You have truly paid a price for refusing to ignore what is obviously happening all around us. You refuse to not see what's happening to our streets and to our daughters and to our women in the streets. And it means something as an American to see you stand. And I just want you to know there are millions of Americans all across the other side of the world that see you, hear you, and are praying for you and are standing with you today. I want to make it clear why I am... Thank you. I will tell you that I am here today, like you, not to stand against anything and hate, not to stand for hatred, but to stand for the most revolutionary idea in human history, that all men are created equal. And not because of a king or parliament says it, but because we are all endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Those rights cannot be taken from us by government or religion. No ideology can take them away. They are life and liberty and the right to speak your mind and to speak truth. The right to worship or not worship according to your conscience. Equal justice under the law. These words come from our American Declaration of Independence, but they were born here on this soil. They were born here in England, the meadows of Runnymede with a Magna Carta. They were born in the English common law that said even the king is not above the law. In the covenant faith of the Scottish people, the stubborn independence of the freeborn Englishmen who said they will never bow to a tyrant. These are the principles that built the freest, most prosperous civilization the world has ever known. And Sharia law cannot abide by it. Sharia law cannot live side by side. It does not see all men that are created equal. It does not practice and protect the right to leave that faith or even criticize that faith. It does not grant equal dignity to every daughter and every son under the law. And where Sharia law advances as a parallel system, our hard-fought rights retreat. And history has shown it time and time again. Our shared failure on both sides of the Atlantic is that we forgot where our rights come from. We have treated liberty as something automatic, something in the air that we breathe, instead of the sacred inheritance that needs to be taught and defended and lived by each and every generation. But that forgetting has opened the door. But the good news is, the uniting hope is that it's not too late to remember. We can, beginning now, teach our children again that those God-given rights, those truths are what makes us free. We can demand that every person that comes to our shore or the shores of any country in Western civilization, or those who are already here, that they must live under the same equal law that protects every citizen. One law, one standard of living, one standard for every man and every woman. And if we can do that, then we'll restore what made the West worth restoring and defending. Great Britain and the United States, we are not separate stories. We are branches of the same tree, the tree that is rooted in equality before God and the law. If we stand together on that foundation, not in anger, but in clarity and the courage that you are showing today just for standing here, then our children will inherit not decline, but they will again inherit a brighter future. A civilization where every person can come here and walk these streets in safety, speak freely, and pursue happiness without fear. That is our fight. That is our inheritance. That is what will unite all of us and renew the West. I am so happy to see all of your flags all in front. We have been told that we should be ashamed. We are not ashamed of our heritage. We have learned from our mistakes. We are proud that our shared heritage changed the world, healed the world, and fed the world. And as our President Lincoln once said, with malice toward none and charity toward all. Let us remember truly who we are. Raise your flags and raise your voices. As our President George Washington said at the beginning of our nation, let us raise a standard that the wise and the honest can repair. The event is in the hand of God. As the scriptures tell us, as for me and my house, we know who we serve. And as our current president, Donald Trump, might say, make England great again. God bless you. May God help us save our shared republics and civilization. God bless you. Thank you for standing.
You know, might I say that a sign that England is in trouble is the fact that none of you can shut the fuck up when somebody is speaking. Good Lord. Maybe I've underappreciated. I was gonna say estimated, but underappreciated the fact that even in a crowd of 70,000 in the United States, when somebody gets up to speak, we listen. And of course, you're always gonna have, you know, some chatter in a crowd like that. It's inevitable. But when the Pledge of Allegiance, the national anthem, or just an important speaker take over the microphone, you can generally whisper, no matter where it is, no matter how many people there are. There's a respect and a decorum that exists. And that's in part due to the inherent freedoms that we have. You know, I was going to elaborate on that, but I think I'll leave it at that for right now. But everybody seems so preoccupied with all of these other things. But can anybody in that crowd that was not paying attention, that was talking to somebody else or doing whatever else, can they really say that whatever else they were doing, whatever other conversation they were holding was more important than what was being said on stage there? I don't know. It's strikingly different. Anyway, I didn't notice, I wasn't paying attention to that the first time I heard the clip, because as you've probably heard, I listen to these things on maximum speed when I'm going through before the show, because I got to take in all of that information as quickly as possible. And so I didn't really catch that the first time around. But nonetheless, this is what Tommy Robinson. And before I play Tommy Robinson
in London,
let's compare or just think. I'm not going to play the video again. I'll play the last few seconds here. But just remember the contrast to what Starmer is alleging is going to take place versus what you're actually seeing.
Who seek to stir it up, as we have done already, because this country belongs to all of us, and I will not tolerate anyone who seeks to stand in the way of that.
Well, first of all, it belongs to Britons. It doesn't belong to people that are not British. Just a thought there. Here, buddy. We'll get to Piers Morgan here in a few minutes, too. Let's listen to what Tommy had to say.
And the biggest risk we face today, you might lose your job. You might get called a racist. You might get condemned by your neighbours. That's the risk. And many people fear that in this country, right? So I want to take a minute now for everyone here to think about this.
Give me just 1 second here, because I think I found a better... Oh, maybe I didn't. I'm trying to find a better video of his speech here.
Are you watching Keir Starmer? This crowd, that helicopter goes from here for miles, miles. Today, I want to ask you all something. Are you ready for the Battle of Britain? 2029, we have an election. We're not asking anyone to go out and fight. But this is the most important moment in our generation. If we don't send a message in our next election, if you don't register to vote, if you don't get involved, if you don't become activists, we are going to lose our country forever. Apathy has led to a government like Keir Starmer. He was elected off 9 million votes. 20 million of us didn't vote. If we stood up and said how we thought of the ballot box, we wouldn't have had open borders. I'm not going to tell you which political party you need to join. We're a cultural movement. I'm going to tell you that you have to join a political party. I don't care if it's Reform, if it's Advance, or it's Restore, or it's a Conservative party. We have to locally get involved in politics. All right, who do you want it to be? I know what you're going to say. I think I can hear Restore. We cannot go home from this event and go back to sleep. We can't, okay? Locally, we have to get organised. That's why I'm saying join your local political party. Get involved as an activist. We saw the election results last week. Congratulations to anyone who become an activist for Reform and send that message. Congratulations to the Patriots that have just shocked Keir Starmer. But the message has to be, unless we get organised, unless we get ready, then there's going to be no answer. But violence is coming to us. It's already here. Hostile communities have been imported into our nation who are not going to integrate, they're not going to assimilate. It's heading to a clash. We can beat that through the ballot box, but we have to wake up the 50% that don't vote. The labels, do you know Keir Starmer's video yesterday? He still thinks we're 5 years ago, because that worked 5 years ago, Keir. The scaremongering, the racist label, the fear-mongering, the far right, it doesn't work anymore, does it, people?
We'll finish this other clip here real quick, too. Hang on 1 sec.
And the biggest risk we face today, you might lose your job. You might get called a racist. You might get condemned by your neighbours. That's the risk. And many people fear that in this country, right? So I want to take a minute now for everyone here to think about this. The biggest fighters that I've witnessed in our generation, I see so many of their flags flying here today. It's the people of Persia. Okay? And I don't care about any criticism from our detractors who talk about other flags being at our demonstration, okay? I want to recognise that those women and the men, but the women in Iran, they don't come out to protest worrying about losing their job. They come out knowing they're going to be executed, and still they come out. Still they come out. They come out to stand against exactly what we're uniting against. A supremacist, tyrannical ideology which has enslaved them. So I want to take a minute now. The IRGC is not the Iranian people. The Iranian people are rich in culture and identity. And there's so many of them here today. We support them. We do not support a terrorist regime. I want to bring a flag up now, and I want every one of you to give it a round of applause to the people resisting tyranny, to the people fighting for freedom in Iran. Get that flag on the stage. Let me see a round of applause. Apparently the flag's been up. Let's have a round of applause for the fighters in Iran, yeah? They're fighting, they're dying. Let's recognise them today.
I think there was supposed to be a flag
can't
there.
Get in contact with them. They're brave, they're fearless.
It's an interesting point. What he said there is critical. And I mentioned earlier that Alan and I had a disagreement on whether or not protests, whether or not rallies are useful. I don't know. But I do know what is far more useful is what he said there. You have to get organized locally. You have to. Because protests don't stop Antifa from rioting, looting, and burning things down. They don't stop BLM from rioting, looting, and burning things down. What does is people defending their communities. I'm not talking about violence. I'm not talking about proactively going and stopping anybody. I'm not talking about silencing anybody or limiting their free speech. I'm talking about defending what is right. Like I said, the founders decided what they were going to do to solve the predicament that they were in was to outline the rights which they believed they were entitled, the permissions and privileges under the crown that they were being ignored, and they were going to stand on them. Period. And that's what we must do. I hope and I pray that the people in Britain will stand up to this. But I fear they won't. And that is the reason for that, I fear, is because they don't have. Well, what principle, what idea are they standing on? The crown? Their British identity alone? I mean, it's a good identity. It's a strong heritage. Hasn't been for a long time. Been rather weak for a long time. In America, we stand on our heritage because it is a proud and honorable heritage. It is a heritage of men that have fought and bled for the ideas that they believed in. And generally speaking, there have been some missteps since progressives have started to undermine our system of government. But generally speaking, we didn't take the fight to anybody. We defended what we believed when the fight was brought to us, including against our own brothers. In some cases, our own fathers. But ultimately, it's the ideas that we stand for. It's not being American in and of itself. It's the ideas. It's the Constitution. It's the principles that we used to all share in this nation. The people of Great Britain don't share those principles. And so I fear that standing on their British identity alone is not enough. I think what they need, rather than or unique from what we need, I think what they need is a revolution to bring in those ideas in the first place. They share some. They've adopted some over the years, somewhat reluctantly in some cases. But they aren't necessarily core to being British. Here in the United States, these ideas are core to being American. And I think that that contrast was pretty evident while Glenn Beck was speaking. You could hear the passion and the reverence in his voice as he spoke about our history, about our heritage. The fact he had to draw on our history and our heritage. He wasn't citing Winston Churchill or King whatever. He was citing Abraham Lincoln and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. To a crowd that was mostly, I don't even know if this is the right word. I legitimately have to look up the definition real quick. It sounds right. It's, I think, the word I'm looking for. Yeah, it is. A crowd that was mostly ambivalent, which, for those who don't know, means undecided as to whether or not to take a proposed course of action. Well, that was a word I was trying to find last night, too. It's a problem we face here in the United States, too. But it was a crowd that was mostly ambivalent and a crowd that was mostly unenthusiastic. Because what does being British mean? What are we protecting? What are we defending? What are we trying to restore? I can't answer that. I'm not British, and I frankly am, you know, as an American, I see a lot of disappointment with Europe. It is the birthplace of the Enlightenment. It is where these ideas that we hold sacred here in the United States come from. But they never truly adopted them themselves. And so I think that if the United Kingdom people wish to fundamentally transform their nation, if they wish to have to be successful in restoring Britain for the British people, I think they need a ideally peaceful revolution rather than reform or simply restoring a prior government. I think that they are coming at it at the wrong angle. And I think that that contrast between Glenn Beck and that audience is very telling. They have the numbers. The media in the UK reported that only 50,000 people showed up to this rally. I'll let you decide for yourself. And by the way, what's up with Piers Morgan on this? I've never understood Piers. Sometimes I hear him say entirely logical things. Other times I hear him say entirely consistently or entirely inconsistent and illogical things. It's too easy to just write him off as a grifter. I don't think that's all he is. I think that there's always some element of that to anyone that is in the media. Now, I do the show for fun, not money, so you're always going to get what I truly believe. But if I was doing it for money, I couldn't blame you for questioning whether or not I truly believe something. How would you ever actually know? So I do think that there is a little bit of that there. But he said today, I don't know if he just has like a personal thing with Tommy or what, but he said 50,000, because that's what the media was reporting, that there were 50,000 people at this event. First of all, that's a lot for Great Britain. Keep in mind, Great Britain, population-wise, is the size of some U.S. states. I think it's a little bit more than any individual state, California being the most populous. I think it's a little bit more than California. I don't know, is California still the most populous? California, I think 39, 40 million, something like that. Yep, 39.4 million. Britain, I think, is more like 60 million. Good Lord. Now that includes, that's the UK, so that would be Scotland and Ireland too, I believe. Almost 70 million now. Wow, they've imported a lot of people. So, considering that, that is still a lot of people. But he said, wow, that's 2,950,000 fewer than Robinson claimed were on his last march. Poor Tommy, that's utterly humiliating. Hope he's okay. Let's assume that it was true, that only 50,000 people showed up. Now, we saw how hard the government was going after people that showed up. So there's no doubt that this crowd was suppressed before it ever started. I mean, they were not letting speakers into the country. They were using facial recognition in the crowd so that they could identify and go after these people later. I didn't mention that part. I'll read a story on that here in a second. It's brief. But what is it that Piers is doing? Do you not support these people? Do you not believe that your nation is in a bad way right now? Because I find it hard to believe that you couldn't believe your nation's in a bad way unless you don't like the nation. Leftists recognize that the United States is in a bad way. They're just okay with it because they no longer like this nation. They want it to fail. Leftists in the UK are no different. They know that the nation is changing. They want it that way. And that's why they defend it. I guess that's what Piers wants too. I don't know. Here's some photos of the crowd, though, and you can decide for yourself how many people were there. Tommy Robinson, in response to Piers that he's an attention-seeking sausage, I love British insults. They're so much better than American insults. Here's some attention getting peers. Happy to do you a favor. Proving again what a total sausage you are. Enjoy public humiliation. Hope you're watching live. Okay. Here's the video of the crowd. Here's a video of the crowd. So it's going to be kind of hard to see. I'll put it up full screen. I think it starts right here. There we go. So that's where the stage is, obviously. And you got two about right here, and then it goes off this way. And you can see it's still solid. All the way back to at least here. There were a lot of people there. Certainly more than 50,000. Still going, still going, still going, still going. Of course it ends right before you get to the backside there, so we can't see if it went either direction, but that is, let's see. So I would count this square as probably one city block as far as the streets itself. And then you have 1, 2, 3, 4 city blocks there, shoulder to shoulder. Let me see what, let's see what Grok says that would be for an estimate of people. I don't know how big the city blocks are in London. I would assume they're slightly smaller than the United States. But in the United States, a city block, you know, if you're talking about New York, you're talking about a standard size. If you're talking about California, a city block could be 5 miles. It just depends. So, but let's just see what he says. If people line a street, hold on, line a typical city street, shoulder to shoulder, for 5 blocks, 4 plus the square, that was what we could definitely see. Roughly how large of a crowd? We've seen this argument ever since Trump ran for election a second time. You know, they've tried re-arguing this over and over and over and over. And these crowds that we used to call millions, they now call thousands. And these crowds that, you know, they constantly overestimate on one side, they constantly underestimate on the other. It just is what it is. Yeah, that's not right, Grok. Grok says 1,500 people. That's a bit off. Oh, he's thinking I'm saying lining. Let me adjust the question here and see if that helps at all. Gave me the same answer. I don't know what the deal is. He says very densely packed would be 4 to 5 square feet per person. A square foot is 3 foot by 3 foot squared, obviously. 4 to 5 foot squared is more than the COVID distance of 3 feet. Useless. Okay. Whatever. Grok's not going to give me a useful answer. He's estimating... I told him that 4 to 5 square feet per person is absurd. And he said, you're right. 3 square feet per person. You could fucking set up a card table in 3 square feet. Alright, whatever. Useless. Anyway, here's some more videos of the fucking crowd. I'm no expert. I know that's more than 50,000. Is it millions? Probably not. It's pretty clear that the threats had some effect. The threats of facial recognition definitely probably had the most effect. You can see tons of people still pouring in there. And that's because, you know, that means that they'll be able to prosecute after the fact. And the fact is, they do that shit in Britain. They do that shit in Canada. Remember what they did to the truckers. I guess, to be fair, they did that in the United States, too. If we look at January 6th. There's another crowd. So, let's see. 1, 2, 3. Can't tell where this block ends. 3, 4, 5. So that's at least 6 city blocks. Let it zoom out as far as it's going to go here. Okay, that's as far as it goes. What else we got?
We're walking up towards Trafalgar Square. The crowds go. Parliament Square is already full. The crowds stretch from here to Euston Station, apparently.
Boy, talk about shoulder to shoulder.
Okay? And Miles, this is the biggest event in British history. This is the moment, a turning point for Britain, a message to the leaders. Britain's ready for the fight. All right? People are up. We're awake. And we're not going to back down. We want our country back.
Is it the biggest event in British history? Maybe not. But again, how many events in British history have they actively tried to suppress like that? Hard to say. This group claims there's 250,000 people. This is a leftist group, but I don't see... I don't see any aerial shots here, so we can't compare. Alright, anyway. Does it matter how many people are there? No. But it is... See, and then this is what they do.
Including...
You saw the photo of the full crowd. This is what the left was sharing.
You've done yourself proud, you've done your country proud. We need to get ready to fight, people. The fight's coming. Let's end it on 2 songs. Thank you. God bless everyone, you man.
Sounds like this is the end of the event. Who knows? Either way, that obviously
convicted
wasn't the full
thugs
crowd.
and
All the way. Come on. Certainly far from nobody. All right. Enough about Britain. Let's get back to the United States, where there's plenty of troubling things happening. And things we need to talk about here. Give me just a second to gather. Trump went with Xi Jinping in China. Let me get a quick update on that. This comes from The Hill. After the Trump-Xi summit, China, not America, is on the back foot. The Chinese Communist Party has been tirelessly promoting a narrative to non-Western populations. They've been promoting it to the Western populations, too. First, the U.S. is in decline. Second, China's rise and dominance are assured. And third, the eclipse of the West is inevitable. You believe that? I don't believe that. China's been selling this narrative for a long time now. I don't believe China can eclipse the United States so long as we remain consistent in our values and principles. I do think we have some correction to do, but I'll address that in a minute. As Xi Jinping met with President Trump this week, the Chinese leader wanted the meeting to appear as though a fading and resentful U.S. is continuing to pass the torch to an ascendant and magnanimous China. Ha! Some Americans were nervous about what Trump, preoccupied with the Iran war, might have carelessly conceded in Beijing, even if no grand bargain was on the table. But a desperate Xi was even more anxious as he confronted growing domestic criticism for his overreach and heavy-handed mishandling of his country's politics and economy. This is because Trump has inadvertently but effectively disrupted China's carefully crafted script about American impotence and irrelevance. China, rather than the U.S., is on the back foot. To advance its narrative, Beijing weaponizes history and claims to be a victim of the West. Its historical perspective can be convincing because it mixes elements of truth with substantial falsehoods and misrepresentations. It begins with a so-called century of humiliation at the hands of Western and Japanese powers from the mid-1800s onward, followed by the Chinese Communist Party's sacred mission to return China to greatness and preeminence. Xi's notion of Chinese rejuvenation feeds on this narrative. According to his framing, the end of the Second World War left the world in an unnatural state. By historical accident, America became the dominant power. From this position, the U.S. cleverly built and supported institutions that gave it unmatched global role and relevance. We built the only global institutions to ever exist. Not for our benefit. In particular, the Bretton Woods system established a new international monetary regime underpinned by the U.S. dollar, and organizations such as the International Monetary Fund and World Bank regulated finance and development. Western Europe and select coterie of Asian allies such as Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan were privileged beneficiaries. Yeah, by agreeing to work with the West. For Xi, history is simply reverting to its natural state. With a push from the Chinese Communist Party, Beijing does not deny that it benefited from the Bretton Woods institutions, especially after its ascension to the World Trade Organization in 2001. But Xi claims that China is changing these institutions from within. They are. Beijing is successfully challenging the West and making the global system fairer so that the non-Western have-nots can prosper. Dealing with Washington and gradually surpassing America in power and influence are the all-important steps that will rejuvenate China so that it can supposedly help others escape and transcend the Western-built global system. While promoting this narrative, Beijing believed it was making a compelling case for China to increase its strength and superiority, all at America's expense. Certainly has been so far. According to Beijing, we are living through the great changes unseen in a century. And Xi has said several times in the nation with greater industrial manufacturing and technological ability will win the economic and geopolitical contest. In this competition, Xi believes China can boast due to its superior performance. To be sure, China has prospered by cynically gaming the global economic system. It was gaining influence in global energy markets that Western allies traditionally dominated. It was gaining ground in traditional American strongholds like Asia, the Middle East, and even Latin America. China's Axis partners such as Russia, Iran, and North Korea were preparing for war, intimidating their neighbors, and creating enormous problems for America and its allies. Meanwhile, U.S. allies were refusing to take their own security seriously, and even spent ever more on bloated welfare systems. In short, the American-made world was in trouble. It was being outspent, outmaneuvered, outthought, and outplayed. This is the record according to Xi. If his pronouncements about imminent Chinese ascendancy are anything to go by, but Trump has disrupted Beijing's strategy. Xi did not anticipate the extent to which Trump has been willing to defy convention, take huge risks, and break things to reverse all these pillars of growing Chinese advantage. Not all of Trump's recent decisions have been about China, but China nevertheless finds itself in a worse strategic position because of them. Xi confronted a difficult environment during his meeting with Trump. The U.S. and its allies in Europe and Asia are rearming. Washington and Israel are now calling the shots in the Middle East at China and Russia's expense. Beijing's influence in Latin America has greatly diminished. Meanwhile, America is reindustrializing and resetting a trading relationship that has benefited China illegitimately and disproportionately. Trump, or his successors, may eventually find that the cost of disruption and breakage is far greater than anticipated. It is too early to claim that Trump has truly reversed the structural trends and advantages China has spent decades building. But it is undeniable that Xi is experiencing an unexpected loss of control and agency. Following the meeting with Trump, the pathway to dominance is far less assured than the Chinese leader believed not long ago. I hope that's true. For whatever reason, our politicians on the left and what we would call rhinos on the right have been giving China whatever they wanted for decades, for seemingly no reason. Unless, and I'm not saying that I believe this necessarily, but the only lens in which I can understand that by is a belief in Marxist communism. And thus, they're giving superiority to really the last remaining communist power. Russia is no longer communist. North Korea is more dictator than communist, but I guess China is too, to be fair. But how do you explain the immense advantages given to China by our previous presidents, left and right? He's right. Trump has entirely flipped the script. Now, whether or not we take advantage of that, whether or not it remains on a successful path, will depend greatly on what happens going forward. Apparently, China is now going to buy oil from the United States. They can't get it from Venezuela. They can't get it from Iran. Who does that leave? If this is true, it's an immense windfall for us. We'll control their oil market. They'll be dependent on us for it. And they buy a lot of it. So I guess we'll see. Whether or not it's true, Iran certainly thinks it is. There's an interesting story today from the Strait of Hormuz. This one comes from MSN. Iran seizes Chinese vessel amid Hormuz toll dispute. Iranian forces took the Chinese-operated Wao Shuan into Iranian waters for inspection, intensifying the maritime toll dispute. Tehran's new Strait of Hormuz fees challenge international law with charges up to $2 million per vessel and mandatory routing. The strait handles 1/5 global oil, disruptions, yada yada. They have established a new government body called the Persian Gulf Strait Authority. This agency is tasked with overseeing vessel transit through the Strait of Hormuz. Its creation marks a formal institutional change in the management of maritime passage in the strategic waterway. Under the new policy, all ships transiting the strait must obtain prior approval from the Persian Gulf Strait Authority. Vessels are also required to follow specific designated corridors during their passage. The Persian Gulf Strait Authority is charging transit fees that can reach as high as $2 million for each ship passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Some captains have paid these fees in Chinese yuan. The imposition of high transit fees in the strait could drive up the cost of shipping, energy, and goods worldwide. This economic impact stems from the increased expenses for those en route. Observers warn that Iran's toll policy could inspire other nations controlling strategic waterways to implement similar measures. Such actions could fragment global shipping norms and increase costs for energy and goods worldwide. Sure, if they want, a bunch of missiles on their doorstep. Iran captured the Wai Chuan, a Chinese-owned floating armory, in waters near the Strait of Hormuz. The vessel is operated by Hong Kong-based Sinaguards and was taken for documentation and compliance inspection. There have been no reports of injuries among the crew. Now, they wouldn't risk that. A Chinese-owned floating armory, huh? We'll have to look into that. I wonder what that means. At the time of its seizure by Iranian forces, the Wao Chuan was flying a false Honduran flag. This detail indicates a potential violation of maritime regulations regarding the vessel registration and flag state authenticity. The capture of the Wao Chuan in an already tense strait region increases the risk of miscalculation between the involved parties. The vessel's dual commercial and armed role adds to the complexity to this situation. The capture of the Chinese-owned Wai Chuan has transformed an otherwise anonymous maritime incident into a politically sensitive matter. It serves as a test to China's influence with Tehran amid circumstances of the vessel's detention. China's ambassador to the United States has criticized U.S.-backed resolution in the Security Council addressing the Strait of Hormuz issue. The criticism indicates that China is likely to oppose the resolution alongside China. No shit. It would appear that this is Iran challenging China. Maybe things are other than they appear, but that's certainly what it seems like. Unsurprisingly, at the rally in London today, leftists were calling for violence. In fact, they were calling for the death of Tommy Robinson. I forgot to add this earlier, so sorry for the backtrack, but a group of protesters in London despicably called for a controversial right-wing figure to be killed, quote, like Charlie Kirk, according to a disturbing video. How much you want to bet they won't be arrested for hate speech or direct threats? Britons, that should tell you everything you need to know about who's genuine in this situation. The crowd was filmed chanting about Tommy Robinson, who organized the massive Unite the Kingdom rally in London Saturday, which saw tens of thousands of demonstrators turn out. Shoot him in the neck, like Charlie Kirk, they can be heard chanting in the clip. The group spewing the vile message was waving Palestinian flags. Shocking. The heinous incident happened as two separate rallies consumed the streets of London. In one, organized by Robinson, a sea of flag-waving Brits marched down Kingsway before crossing London Bridge and rallying in Parliament Square, with many protesters wearing Make England Great Again. The estimated 50,000 protesters draped themselves in British flags, including the Union Jack and St. George's Cross, alongside Scottish and Welsh flags. A pro-Palestinian march also drew thousands for the commemoration of Nakba Day, memorializing the Palestinians who fled their homes during the war surrounding Israel's creation in 1948. The far-left protesters call for Tommy Robinson to be hung like Mussolini and shot in the neck like Charlie Kirk. Let's see. There's a bunch of quotes here. I'm looking to see if there's anything relevant. Robinson was quoted saying, "We're a Christian nation. Why do we keep seeing demonstrations from Palestine in our nation? There's one today, when Christians are being butchered and massacred across every Middle Eastern nation," Robinson said on the stage during his speech. "While our feckless PM, Keir Starmer, creates division and fake outrage, we will continue to unite the kingdom. He's such a wanker. We're in a fight for the soul of this country, and the Unite the Kingdom March this weekend is a stark reminder of exactly what we are up against. Its organizers are peddling hatred and division, plain and simple. We will block those coming into the UK who seek to incite hatred and violence. That's according to Starmer. The PM concluded with a warning. For anyone who sets out to wreak havoc on our streets to intimidate or threaten anyone, you can expect the full force of the law. Starmer revoked the visas of 11 right-wing agitators from entering the country for the Unite the Kingdom rally, according to the BBC. Those banned, including the Polish MEP, Dominik something, an anti-Islam influencer, Valentina Gomez. Investigative journalist Nick Shirley was in attendance at the event and slammed Starmer for threatening to ban him from the UK if he spoke at Saturday's rally. "I've heard that those that speak today might be banned. I sure hope that's not the case," he told Rebel News, adding that, "I think it's crazy. When you see an attack on free speech like that, it really makes you wonder where this country is going." It's amazing the double standard that you get. The pro-Palestinian march, claiming they have 250,000 people, while only showing photos of the crowd from street level, and the media reporting that number because that's what they reported, to claiming that the Robinson rally only has 50,000 when we can clearly see it's more than that. Is it millions? No, but it's clearly more than 50,000. This comes alongside stories like this one. Police probing arson attack at former London synagogue after a wave of anti-Semitic violence in the UK. Gee, I wonder where that comes from. If only one had an indication. So what does all this mean? By the way, the Metro Police, or the Met Police, rather, in the UK say 11 people were arrested for, quote, a variety of offenses. But they did not specify whether they came from the Unite the Kingdom rally or the pro-Palestinian march, which means they came from the pro-Palestinian march. You know they would have said immediately if they came from the Unite the Kingdom rally. Earlier today, 2 men were arrested near Euston Station on suspicion of grievous bodily harm following an incident in Birmingham where a man was run over. They arrived in London to attend one of the protests. Also, there was an attack in Italy today involving running over of Italian people and stabbing. Sure, you can guess who the perpetrator is. So listen to this. This comes from The Guardian, by the way, which is a leftist UK website. Organizers of the pro-Palestinian Nakba Day rally estimate at least 250,000 people have attended, making it 10 times bigger than the Unite the Kingdom demonstration. First of all, that would be 5 times bigger, you dumb fuck. Second, they say numbers for Tommy Robinson's march appear to be significantly down on his last show of strength in September, according to early police estimates. Early police estimates. Metropolitan Police believe that 60,000 attended the far-right Unite the Kingdom march, markedly down from the 150,000 the Met estimated for the same protest in September. So they take the word of the organizers for the pro-Palestinian march, but they take an early estimate by the Met Police for the Unite the Kingdom march. This is what they do. It's meant to discourage, it's meant to dissuade, and it's meant to demoralize. They further down say a total of 31 arrests have now been made, but there was a note at the top that said only 11. And again, they don't specify who from which rally. Let's see. And then, yeah, something unrelated. Okay. I absolutely love I absolutely love that they take the word of the organizers in one case, and they take a ridiculously low estimate in the second case. The fact is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you believe. Don't be demoralized by the mainstream media. It doesn't matter what you believe, because they have to recognize that these marches continue to grow. And there's, frankly, nothing that can not much that they can do to actually stop it. Sorry. Give me just a second here and we'll get right back on track. All right.
forward.
Trying to decide what else I want to go to here. I have a few other stories. There was an explosion today at a lumber mill in Maine where a firefighter was killed, and we believe 11 people are now in a level 1 trauma center. It appears to be an accident, though we don't actually know. We don't actually know what the start of the fire was, but it was a grain silo. Of course, it wasn't used for grain; it was used for wood chips. But it was a grain silo type building that caught fire and then exploded. These have caused immense devastation in the past before, and the images are absolutely shocking. Make sure to pray for the
call them
victims of this event.
A
Here's
devastating
quick story.
fire.
So that's what's left, and I'll show you what it looked like to begin with here in a minute.
Ripping through a lumber mill in Maine today. Flames reaching above the tree line.
There's been a huge explosion. The silo just exploded. This is very bad. A lot of people are 3rd degree.
Searsmont firefighters, who are volunteers, had responded to a silo fire that then exploded, according to one fire department in Maine, injuring firefighters and civilians, as well as destroying several fire trucks. The Searsmont fire chief telling a local paper the explosion blew him 15 feet right through the air.
That whole building is gone.
Maine Health Medical Center saying it's now treating 10 patients at its level 1 trauma center. You can see life flight helicopters arrive as officials declared a mass casualty event.
I walked up to this very chaotic scene initially, and not because of the efforts of the first responders, but because of the magnitude of the fire involvement and the amount of sheer buildings that were on fire.
Maine's governor urging folks to stay clear of the area, swarmed by local, state, and federal agencies, including the ATF. Drone video capturing the aftermath. You can see buildings reduced to ash. Robbins Lumber, a family business that owns and manages 30,000 acres, says all of their employees have been accounted for.
Buildings can be replaced, employees cannot.
As fire officials investigate what caused this perilous blaze. Emily Ikeda, NBC News.
You might.
Yeah, by the way, this story right here popped up in my news feed on every source of news that I use. This is what was more important than the United Kingdom rally in Britain today.
Call them wayward Waymos, one after another driverless taxis, streaming into several Atlanta cul-de-sacs at virtually all hours of the day and night.
So as more were coming in, more were going out. It was just a constant stream of
it's probably
coming in around the circle.
After roughly 50 of them showed up last weekend, the annoyed neighbors put out a traffic turtle, but that only led to longer backups.
One of them almost did run over our cul-de-sac cat, Buddy, and so that was the final straw.
The robo-taxis appear to be in a holding pattern, waiting for their next assignment. Waymo tells NBC News it has already worked with our partner to address this routing behavior. It's the latest Waymo speed bump, coming just days after the company recalled nearly 4,000 robo-taxis for software fix, after some cars in Texas and California drove into flooded streets and stalled. In recent years, Waymos have also failed to yield to school buses and caused rush hour gridlock.
Nothing we are doing today with automated vehicle technology is safe enough. It's got to be better tomorrow. And that is the change in trajectory we need for vehicle safety in America today.
Waymo says it's already identified a software fix for the flooding issue, and it's refining its operations in extreme weather, and says it's 13 times safer than humans in crashes involving pedestrians. Tom?
Rescue crews.
Just silly.
A car
but
jumps the curb and kills.
Let's take a look real quick. This is what that fire looked like. This is the firefighter here, Brian Simmons. They lost his life. So if you could pray for his family. This is what that mill looked like. I'm guessing this is the area that we saw on fire. let me see here. Let me look a little closer because you can see it's a big processing. These are all logs. This would be chips, and that's why I'm assuming this is what we saw on fire over here. And I'm guessing, but I'm not sure, that it was probably this silo that exploded. There should be a little silo right here somewhere that I saw in the thing. But I'm thinking this is what was burning down right here. Go full screen for a second. This right here. Just based on the photos and stuff that were available. It looks like their bleaching pond was empty. But this is obviously the main fire hazard of a wood processing plant like this, too. Anyway, just a side note for today, but I want to wrap up today by talking about us. Us being the United States. Oh, last thing before I get to that. During his excursion to China, Trump coordinated with Nigeria, of all places, to take out another terrorist.
For more on this, let's bring in Dan Hoffman. He's former CIA station chief in the Middle East and elsewhere, now a Fox News contributor. Dan, this is a name that doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. I wasn't aware of this guy as the number 2 person in ISIS, but getting him is a big deal.
It is, and I think the fact that we're not tracking on him is in and of itself recognition that the U.S. government is doing a good job of finding and fixing and finishing our terrorist targets. We all don't wake up in the morning wondering whether we got Abu Bakr al-Minuki, but it's a really critical intelligence success for us. It's noteworthy because we partnered with our Nigerian armed forces and used them as a force multiplier. The intelligence we had to enable us to act as snipers, to track the movements of this high-value target, number 2 in ISIS, reportedly for months. And lastly, the impact on our homeland, because ISIS is not only interested in conducting attacks in Western Africa, they are focused on our homeland. And when we take out a leader like this, we are potentially disrupting plans that ISIS might have had to target us here in the United States or potentially overseas.
And the fact that the president says, you know, the Nigerian government was involved in the planning and execution of this attack is good news. I mean, you know, you have to be careful who you share intelligence with because things leak. But this one apparently was a success.
Yeah, if there's one thing I learned at CIA serving years overseas in war zones, it's that our local partners can be extraordinarily helpful to us with their own intelligence on the ground, their ability to themselves infiltrate terrorist networks because they have native language ability. And so it's important for us to enable our own mission by partnering with others, as we did here. And the good news is that this is a stepping stone, potentially, to future collaboration against these sorts of targets.
How did we find him? How did we...
All right. There's no answer to that yet, by the way. This is what Trump posted, though, on this. Tonight, at my direction, brave American forces and the armed forces of Nigeria flawlessly executed a meticulously planned and very complex mission to eliminate the most active terrorist in the world from the battlefield. Abu Bilal al-Minuki, second in command of ISIS globally, thought he could hide in Africa. But little did he know we had sources who kept us informed on what he was doing. He will no longer terrorize the people of Africa or help to plan operations to target Americans. With his removal, ISIS's global operation is greatly diminished. Thank you to the government of Nigeria for your partnership on this operation. God bless America. President Donald J. Trump. All right. Now, let's get back to my wrap up here. I think we have a big problem in the conservative movement. I think we have a big problem in America in general, obviously. In fact, there's lots of them. I'm gonna wait to talk about this story. Yeah. There was a story that I was going to include with this, but I'm going to wait to talk about that for now. And just go with this. You know, I posted this last night, but I'm going to read it again now. And elaborate a little bit. I was watching, or rather, my son was watching TV. And he was watching a show. I'm not going to mention what show, but it was just a more modern sitcom. And I have this struggle with my son all the time because he's 11 years old, and it's incredibly difficult to find shows that he both wants to watch and that are appropriate for him to watch. Not just because of the inappropriateness, the general inappropriateness of a lot of television today, but also the themes and the messaging that are entirely inconsistent with traditional American values. I don't want him taking that stuff in or thinking these things are normal. They're not normal. They literally create the TV shows to try and normalize them. And it's really a shame the way that leftism has been able to overtake liberalism in this nation and destroy cultural icons and pillars of our society, like Hollywood, for example. Now, Hollywood's always been left-leaning, but it was infiltrated by Marxists long ago, and they've slowly taken it over, along with, theater and music and many of the arts in general. And so we went from creating culture that defined the world. American culture, not long ago, defined the world. People all over the world strive to own a pair of Nikes. To listen to American music. To watch American movies. And now, because leftism, which shares very few bonds with liberalism in general, American liberalism, which is unique to liberalism anywhere else in the world, leftists hate this country. They seek to destroy it. And they do so by destroying, whether intentionally or otherwise, our institutions. I'm not proud of what comes out of American culture today. Are you? Our culture was revered around the world because it was built on the greatest men in the world. But the farther we get away from that, the worse it becomes. I said it really is a tragedy to see how leftism has destroyed American cultural pillars like Hollywood. Even most liberals are able to finally admit it out loud because it's so bad. The film, television, and music industry, they were always very liberal-leaning, but still fundamentally American. They've since exchanged all of those core values, the same ones that connected left and right, as uniquely American. Individualism, nationalism, free market capitalism, what we used to call basic, but is now considered right-wing Christian morality, and a true belief in fundamental individual rights. They've exchanged all that for collectivist, Marxist socialist, globalist, hedonist, and intersectionalist, fundamentally un-American values. You can't have a free, strong, and prosperous union without the former. Pulling oneself up by the bootstraps, as it's often referred, is not how you treat. It's not about how you treat others. It's not about how you view others. It's about how you must view yourself in order to maintain the necessary, precarious, and dangerous liberty required to have the nation that we have this far had. Since these once liberal and now leftist-dominated circles have abandoned these necessary truths, it's frankly no surprise that our union, our society, and our culture is currently in dismal health. It's a bitter loss not just to our posterity, but to the world, this period of American depreciation. It is only once we fully recognize and face the real menaces tearing the red, white, and blue fabric that we will recapture the glory and honor of the legacy that was both burdened and bestowed to us. This is, was, will be, and always has been a great and honorable nation, comprised in whole of great and honorable men. We owe it to the blood shed in that honor, not the least to keep a dim flame from extinguishing, but to reignite the raging fires of righteousness and self-sacrifice that brought what is, with the evidence of thousands of years of recorded human history, the greatest nation to ever form. Now, I said at the outset of this that we have a big problem in this country, not just with leftism, but also on the right. How many people on the right truly believe in individualism, nationalism, free market capitalism, and basic morality? How many people on the right practice hedonism, collectivism, in various senses? The only way to have a free nation, a successful free nation, it's not the only way to have a free nation. We can have a free nation with collectivist, hedonist ideals, without basic morality and individual rights, but it won't be successful. And it'll be a dark, awful place. It'll be anarchy, is what it'll be. The only way that we've been able to have a free nation that isn't utter and pure anarchy is to holding ourselves to the highest possible standards. What made America unique wasn't the lack of laws or the lack of authoritarian principle and rule. It was the fact that we were able to get by without that rule, without it all going to hell. Because each individual held themselves to a higher standard than they held anybody else. Because when the chips were down, when the economy was bad, when a person was struggling, they didn't blame it on everybody else. They didn't blame it on boomers or past generations. They took responsibility, even for things beyond their control. They didn't make excuses. They made a difference. They gave more than they took. They left behind more than they were given. They were honorable men that would sooner trade their life, their freedom, their wealth, and anything else, virtually, than be dishonorable men. They were men that fought and bled for people they had never met. And we dishonor them by being selfish, hedonistic assholes. I say the quote all the time, and I'm going to say it again from Benjamin Franklin. Not Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin said, "A republic if you can keep it." That ties in. But I think it was John Adams who said, this nation I'm going to get it wrong, even though I say it all the time. This nation was created for a religious and moral society, and is holy. This Constitution was created. There we go. This Constitution was created for a religious and moral society, and wholly inadequate to the government of any other. No truer words could have been spoken. In order to have maximum liberty, we have to have maximum restraint. We have to have maximum discipline. I don't care what others choose to do. I care what I allow myself to do. I care about the standard I hold myself and others that are, in my circle of influence to. If we want to repair this nation, if we want to restore it to the nation we remember and that we love, we must take it on ourselves, because no one is going to take it on for us. We must uphold it in everything that we do. Too many are sitting around waiting for somebody else to sacrifice first, so they don't feel their sacrifice is wasted. That will never accomplish anything. You have to live it and breathe it every single day. The good news is, what does that mean? What does that look like? What does that mean you have to do? It's very simple. You just do the right thing every time. No matter how small, no matter how big, you do what you know is right. You hold yourself to a higher standard than anyone else's when nobody is asking you to, when nobody is looking. I used to challenge my mom on virtually everything. And one of the things I challenged her on was saying excuse me, even when I'm by myself. Because she used to say, you need to say it every time, no matter what. If I did something that needed excusing. And I said, well, what if I'm by myself? She said, you say it. I said, but why? Because it's the right thing to do. because it's the principle, not the outcome. I want to know what you guys do this week to better this nation. I want to know what you guys do this week to better your local community, to make a difference in restoring this nation. Let me know on the next one. With that, my name is Chris, and this has been the JBU.Show.
Wait, I want to be a little bit louder.
Yeah.
This is only between us.
This is just between us.
This is between us.
Perfect.
Perfect.